All right, what's up, Dragon Brood? We're going to be getting right into reviewing all of the cards in Wilds of Eldraine. Well, at least all the rares and mythics. So this doesn't take an all-day process. We are live streaming this. I will be breaking this up into a lot of different videos, so you can actually have each by color, so you don't have to sit through like a 3-hour presentation. But yeah, let's get right into it and talk about some cards. All right, so first things first, we have Archon of the Wild Rose, 2 colorless, white, 4/4, flying. Other creatures you control that are enchanted by auras you control have base power and toughness 4/4 and have flying. This is actually really cool in the sense that it's a 4/4 flyer, so that's pretty nice. The interesting thing too is that the roll tokens count as auras. So if you have a way to put a bunch of rolls on things and then you draw this, well, you'd have a bunch of 4/4 flying creatures, and that's actually pretty strong. Now, it is, doesn't protect itself or anything. It's just a 4/4 flyer, but it is a sizable body. And if your opponent's already used removal trying to stop your other smaller things, this is actually pretty big. This can almost just be a win card, right? If you've done any significant amount of damage, I mean, giving even 3 creatures effectively flying and some bonus is actually pretty big here. So yeah, this could be a winner in some lists by itself and gives you a reason to kind of want to play more roles, which is pretty good in this set. Now, let's see what else we got here. We've got a Tale for the Ages. So, this is a colorless and a white enchantment. Enchanted creatures you control get +2/+2. So, this is actually pretty cool because it kind of goes with the last card, right? Because the rolls count as auras attached to these other creatures. So, then you get +2/+2. So, you'll have a bunch of 6/6 flyers, I guess. So, yeah, nothing wrong with that. This is actually really good. And can just fit into a bunch of other decks that already care about auras. This is also probably pretty sweet if you're playing some enchantment-based thing in Commander as well. Also, 2 quick notes here. We've had to re-record this segment for just the white cards. All the other stuff will be the original recording that'll be going up as individual videos. But also, why I have a chance going back over these cards. Now I have actually seen these, whereas on the other videos I haven't seen them. But if you would help me out, it would be really appreciated if you watch the other videos and or hit the like button on this one. It will help us out a lot. And if you consider becoming a member or even just buying some merchandise down below, that does support the channel. So check that out. Also, coolstuffinc.com. If you're thinking about buying any cards for Wilds of Eldraine, you can use code DRAGON and it'll save you 5% on whatever you buy on their website. It doesn't even have to be just Magic stuff. Okay, continuing on with this. Expel the Interlopers. 3 colorless, white. Choose a number between 0 and 10. Destroy all creatures with power greater than or equal to the number chosen. This card's dumb. It's another sweeper. You just choose 0. Destroy all the creatures. Meh. I mean, I guess you could play it if you're playing a bunch of small things like tokens. So there is that. You can choose like 3 and then everything that's larger than 3 dies and you keep the little dudes. So I guess it does have some flexibility that the other sweepers don't have. But like, we don't need more sweepers in the format. Like, we literally could not print a sweeper for the next 3 sets, and standard will be fine forever. Like, we don't need to worry about it. Anyway, moving on to the next card. What do we have here? Oh, yeah. Heartflame Doulas. This is a colorless and a white for a 3/1 human knight. Instant and sorcery spells you control have lifelink. It has an adventure attached to it, which is a 2 colorless and a red for an instant. It deals Heartflame Slash, deals 3 damage to any target. What I like about this card is that it is a 3/1 for 2, which is solid. Not great, but solid. There's a lot of things that deal 1 point of damage, it can kill it, so that is a liability. However, it is a human and a knight, so it could get a bonus from anything that pumps humans or pumps knights, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. And the ability itself is a solid instant that can deal 3 damage to anything. Creature, player, planeswalker, battle, whatever. So I do like all that. And then if you are just playing some, let's say, mono white with red splash for burn damage, then everything you play also has lifelink. So that's actually pretty good. Now, do I think this automatically makes the cut in a lot of those decks? Not necessarily, but it could end up being a key part to a new deck type. If we care about red with burn spells or something like that, this would definitely have a home and have significant upside. Lady of Laughter. This one's kind of interesting, right? Because it's 5 mana, 3 colorless, white for a fairy noble, 4/5. I don't even know if we have that many white fairies overall, unless we got a bunch in Eldraine. But this is a flyer, and then at the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, you draw a card. The thing is, we have other things that make it easier to draw cards with like tokens coming into play. We're talking about like Takasha's Welcome and stuff like that. I just don't know if paying 5 for a 4/5 that might get you an extra card, or maybe every other turn, is worth it. I mean, I guess if you already have things that are putting tokens into play, then you just get an extra card, or maybe even this with Takasha's Welcome, then you're getting like 2 cards a turn. Like, that's a thing, but it feels like a pretty hefty investment when there's just better cards at 5 mana. I mean, there's better Planeswalkers you could play in the spot. AO the Dawn Sky, I think we talked about on stream, where you can play instead of this, and that just gets you more long-term value. So I'm probably more likely to play some of those other cards than play this, but I don't hate it. I just feel like it needs a few more cards, or I got to see a couple more things to make me justify putting this in over a ton of other things. Moonshaker Cavalry. 5 white for a 6/6 Spirit Knight flying. When the cavalry enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and gets +X/+X on a turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. One of the first things I want to put out on cards like this, or point out on cards like this, is that this is not Craterhoof. It's close, but it's not Craterhoof. Whereas Craterhoof itself, I believe, also has haste. Green also has easier ways to ramp up to stuff. Green also has ways to search out creatures a lot easier and just put them into play. So those really do make a difference. This is probably, I'd almost say definitely, unless you find a way to trick the card into play, not going to be playable in 60 card formats, so I don't think that's really a concern. But it is going to be a thing for a commander. You're only playing one-ofs anyway, and if this is something you draw on like turn 6+, and you have a way to cast it with like even 3 or 4 creatures out, you're probably going to finish somebody off. You know, you're making flyers. I will say this though, they get +X/+X in flying, but they don't get trample. Now I'm looking at it, and that's a big difference, right? Because your opponent can block with, well, there's a bunch of tokens, Thopters, Fairies, Spirits, whatever, that people have, that they can block with and not die. And that, I think, makes it the biggest difference. However, if you do have like 8 or 10 tokens and you've been making a token factory or something, and you play this and you attack with a bunch of like +9/+9 things that are flying, yeah, your opponent's just going to be dead. And we will get enough damage through that you will kill somebody. So still a good card, not Craterhoof, but close. Pollen Shield Hare, colorless and a white for a 2/2. I actually kind of like what this card's doing. It's a rabbit. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1. And then it has a sorcery adventure attached called Hair Raising for 1 green. Target creature you control gains vigilance and gets +X/+X on the turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So obviously this card very much wants to be in a token deck. Some things to be aware of, though. We do know there's actually very good sweepers right now. There's a bunch of stuff that gets rid of small things right now. So you're going to be fighting that uphill battle if you're just hardcore on tokens. The thing I don't like about this card, though, is that it doesn't pump each other. It's not like tokens and rabbits get the bonus, right? So if your opponent plays any of the things that like deal 2 damage everything or something like that, you just lose all your creatures. And that's a little tough, even if you have like 2 rabbits out. So that's not great. But it's not a bad card if you're already playing tokens anyway. This is just more upside for your stuff. And the other abilities, not bad. Now, it would be nice if it was an instant to help out tokens decks, but even being a sorcery, you can turn something into like a 4/4 or 5/5, then play the hair on the same turn and pump the rest of your team, and just kind of just pose a bigger threat, which is super nice. So I don't mind that at all. This should be played and find a home, but I don't think it's going to be the type of card that just automatically elevates token decks. Funny as it is, another rabbit. So Regal Bunnicorn, a colorless and a white for an XX rabbit unicorn. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of non-land permanents you control. So obviously, this is something that would love to have a bunch of tokens, but it also counts other things too. So other auras, other artifacts, planeswalkers, whatever. It gets bigger for all of those. The downside is if all those other little things die, then this dies too. And we already know people like playing stuff like Gix's Command. And there's another card already exists, Queen Alanal, that I believe is like 2 white and a green, that every time you play a creature, you get another token, and then Queen Alanal's power is equal to the number of total creatures you control. That card doesn't even get a bunch of play right now. Now, this is 1 less, but you also aren't getting the additional token. So it makes me wonder, like, if that other card doesn't get played, is this one likely to get played, right? It doesn't have any abilities, it doesn't trample, it doesn't first strike, doesn't lifelink. Right, if it had anything else, it might be more exciting. I think right now, it probably works just because if you're already playing a token deck that's decent. But we do know in the future there's going to be a set that involves anamorphic creatures, and if something gives rabbits a bonus, then there's a real chance you play this and the hare with some other way to make tokens because rabbits, you know, are being rabbits. then yeah, it's possible this has more value 6 to 9 months from now, 9 months from now at least, than it does maybe in a month. We have Spellbook Vendor, colorless and a white, 2/2, human peasant, vigilance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 1 colorless. When you do, create a sorcerer role token attached to target creature you control. This is an interesting card, right? It's a human, so it can get benefit from a lot of human things in standard, which is great. There's a lot of things we know that care about things being enchanted, about having rolls on them, and this gives you one every single turn. And the sorcerer roll is actually pretty good because it gives you a +1/+1, and then whenever you attack, the creature gets scry 1. And you can just keep doing this to a bunch of different creatures. Now, you put it on the same creature, the first one falls off, but it's just a free +1/+1 every turn, plus a bonus, right? So nothing wrong with that. This card itself also has vigilance, which is really good. So it's got a lot going for it. My only issue is, until we know decks that want all the different roles or care about things being enchanted or whatever, not really sure where this fits yet. There will be a deck. If we have enough things that care about roles and enchantments and all that good stuff, then yeah, this is definitely going to have a home because you can just play a role every turn effectively. And there's nothing stopping you from putting a role on a card that already has it. So if you have something that cares about when a creature gains a new role or something like that, this would totally trigger it every single turn. Or if you have multiples, you could trigger them every turn, right? So lots of things you could probably do with this, but we don't really know just yet. So it's one of those cards I say like probably isn't worth much or worth worrying about because it probably only fits in one specific deck, maybe 2. But when it comes up, if it works, the value is going to be very high on it. Now, I do remember seeing this previewed even before I did this review, but 3 blind mice. It's 2 colorless and a white for a saga that has Chapter 1, create a 1/1 white mouse creature token. Chapter 2 and 3, so it does have 4 chapters. Chapter 2 and 3, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. And Chapter 4 is creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. 3 mana to get a 1/1 is not great. I mean, no matter how you look at it here. And it's a 1/1 with no other abilities. And then you're kind of hoping you already have some other token creature out, or that the mouse lives so you can copy it with chapters 2 and 3. Because if not, then you're basically getting no value for your 3. Like if you're forced to block or your opponent pings it or whatever and it just dies, you basically paid 3 mana to not really get much of anything. Now the 4th chapter, you actually get to put a +1/+1 on things and they get vigilance, but that's not great for 3 mana, right? At the end of all that. So I'm not sure where this belongs. And it also makes a mouse and not a rat. So that doesn't fit into some decks. And none of these tokens have any abilities. So yeah, this one's tough. I don't see it on this one. I'd almost be a little bothered that this is a rare, other than the fact that it might still do something in limited if you draw it later in the game. But this is not something you're going to be looking for, I would imagine, in most 60 card builds. And I'm not even sure you want this in a commander build, unless it's one of the few commanders that specifically care about a lot of counters going on things, or maybe, something that cares about enchantments, and then you're just getting extra value making more bodies. Virtue of Loyalty, 3 colorless, white, enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Untap those creatures. And then it has an instant adventure attached to it. Ardenvale Fealty, colorless, and a white. Create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. The interesting thing about, I think those are rings. Those are the rings of Brighthearth in the back. No, because those are in Lorwyn. I don't know what those are down there. But interesting that this card is, one, just good anyway. Like you can flash in a 2/2 knight with vigilance. And we play other cards that flash in like 1/1s. So this is totally reasonable. Not great, but reasonable. And you are getting a 2/2 with an upside ability, right? That you can attack and block. So that's solid. But the ability itself is actually really good. Like the card, this thing, on rate, the card is already not bad, right? You pay 5 to have an enchantment that at the end of every turn, you just put a +1/+1 on everything you control, right? And you untap them. That's the other thing, right? So you've gotten your attack in. Your opponent maybe blocked a couple things, maybe didn't. Then you put a +1/+1 on everything that lived, and then they're untapped. So now your opponent doesn't even have a good attack, and you get to do this again next turn. If they don't wipe your board at that point, you're just going to start running away with stuff. But it's interesting because this card can fit in a token deck. It can fit in an aggro deck. Like, we've played some decks that played like token planeswalkers type things. Like, it could fit there. This is a card that probably goes into a ton of commander decks because it's all just upside value for the most part. Now, I will say this. This is one of the ones that's probably better in 60 card than it is in 100 card formats, right? Because you are just making a 2/2 knight, which isn't going to have a lot of value in commander. But if your deck already cares about making tokens and putting +1/+1s on things or whatever, then this card does become reasonably viable. But not something that's going to make a lot of decks just because. But in 60 card formats, if you're playing any type of white aggro stuff, this kind of becomes a card that's worth considering. Even just the instant side of being able to let your opponent sweep the board, and then during their end step, cool, put a 2/2 down, and then now you just start attacking again, right? So I don't mind this card at all. I think this card's actually very good. Werefox Bodyguard, a colorless white 2/2 creature elf fox knight. It has flash. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to one other target non-fox creature until Werefox Bodyguard leaves the battlefield. And you can also pay a colorless and a white, sacrifice it to gain 2 life. This is kind of an interesting card, right? Because it's basically the white werewolf, right, with flash. But it can't target fox creatures, and I haven't seen that many that people look like they're going to be playing, so it's probably non-issue. I mean, though that being said, we will be moving into the anamorphic set some point in the next year and a half that actually probably has foxes. So maybe in the future it's more of a problem. But right now, not so much. But it's a brutal Cathar effectively. However, it's weird that this is a werefox that isn't a werewolf. It also happens to be an elf fox knight. I don't know why it's an elf, because there's nothing elf-like about this at all. And it's interesting that it can sacrifice itself to gain 2 life. So I don't know if maybe that's... And well, I guess this, in cases where there may be a lot of tokens, you could exile a token, then you don't have to worry about any value going away, and then you can sacrifice this later for 2 life. So I don't mind that. I guess that kind of makes sense. If you have something under it, obviously you're not going to want to sacrifice it. But it is a cool card. Maybe the aggro deck's going to end up playing 6 or 7, some combination of this and Brutal Cathar. That could be super annoying. But yeah, lots of cool stuff going on with this. It does flash in, which is super nice, so it gives you some extra value there. Could be a fun combat trick as well, because there are times where your opponent flashes in Wandering Emperor to make a 2/2 to try and block something, and you're like, okay, cool, well, I'm going to move your 2/2, and then you're still going to take this extra damage, that sort of thing. So stuff like that. There's some interesting corner cases. I don't think it's necessarily better than Brutal Cathar. It's one of those ones that's similar but different. But with that said, we got through all the white cards. Have fun watching all the other videos. We reviewed all the cards. And please remember, if you enjoyed this or you want to see more reviews, please like the video. Let me know you enjoyed it so that way we can do more. And if you know any other cool combos or anything, maybe stuff I overlooked, let me know in the comments.